And while we were at Camp Pickett, Virginia, we began to, we got our tanks and we were introduced to the LST, the landing ship tank. And it was there that we did our practice boarding the ship, going to sea, and effecting landings. The first experience I had, the first trip out, was my company was in a group called I've forgotten. It was 12 LSTs. But the commander of that group was called a Commodore. And the Commodore was aboard our ship, and he said, now, came on the radio and he said, now, when the bell rings, the doors are going to open, the ramp is going to go down, and I want the tanks off onto the land. Well, we went out to an island off of Virginia Beach, and the tank skated up on the land. The horn sounded, the doors opened, my first tank went off, and all that was left showing was a 50 caliber machine gun. We had hit a sandbar, and it was deep on the other side of the sandbar. Well, all the guys were rescued, but the tank was still there. As far as I know, it's still there. Anyway, it was from there that we sailed to North Africa. Mers el Kabir was our point of landing. And it was from there that we made our invasion. Well, not from there. We went on over to, forgotten the name of the port. Anyway, we made a trip overland to our point of departure, and we landed at Oran, Africa. At that time, I was a staff officer and had no command of equipment. But the tanks went ashore and dispersed, and the company commanders took them to their respective battle areas. And all I could do was to find a place for a command post. Well, I got into a Jeep and went up, followed the troops on up, and got into the combat area. Well, that was my first experience in shooting and getting shot at. One of our tanks got hit and burned, and one of the crew members came out of a fire, and of course he didn't live. It was shaky at that point because we weren't sure that we could secure the area. And it was, the first 24 hours was very seriously in doubt. We got out of that all right. And the next thing was, when we broke out of there, we were going down the highways in Naples, in Italy. We got into Naples, didn't stay. Naples was taken easily. And then we went on up north towards Rome. Got to the Volturno River, and that's where everything bogged down. On the hill across from the Volturno was the Abbey, Westminster Abbey. Not Westminster Abbey, what am I saying? Anyway, it was a monastery that was defended well. And we bogged down there. Our tanks could shoot across to the Abbey, but we couldn't, it wasn't effective. So they pulled us out and sent us back to a place called Battipaglia, which was outside of Naples. to stage for the invasion of Salerno. And it was while we were there that I met a young skipper of a minesweeper. We had a party at one of the restaurants in town. And he invited me the next morning to have breakfast aboard his ship. So I took part of my crew and we went down to have breakfast, enjoyed ourselves. I felt like I ought to reciprocate, so I invited him up to our bivouac area to drive a tank, see if he was interested in driving a tank. Well, meanwhile, on the way to the Volturno River, I got a letter from the Ordnance Department, and the letter said, you owe $80,000 for the tank that was driven off into the water at Virginia Beach.
Wow.
I took that to my commanding officer. He looked at it, read it, toward. Anyway, the rest of the story is that this young naval lieutenant got in the tank, and we were going down a little road, and there were deep bar ditches on both sides. He pulled one lever and drove the tank over into that bar ditch on its side. And one track was suspended, and we couldn't get in. I looked at him and I said, do you know what this tank cost? You know what you're going to have to pay for this? Well, we had a lot of fun out of it, but I explained to him whatever. Anyway, we later on, when we were invading southern France, there was a huge firing of artillery and naval ships and everything else at the beachhead. And I was standing up on the deck of the LST, and here came his little minesweeper around my bow. And this guy was standing on his bow. And here I am standing there in all the artillery fire and naval gunfire, trying to get his attention. Needless to say, I didn't have any luck. Anyway, we went to Anzio and spent several months there without any effort. I couldn't do any good with my tanks, but because of my artillery training, I could shoot them indirect as artillery. And that was our biggest effort there. The day we left out, I lost 11 tanks within an hour due to landmines. So we went up a main highway going north, but on the west of us was a German column going north parallel to ours. We got about 60 miles up the road, and the infantry commander came to me and he said, there is a crossing of the river between us and the West Highway over there. I'd like for you to go over and defend the city. Take some tanks and go over and defend it from the Germans. Well, the only way we could get there without being seen was just to swim the river for a ways and then come into the town from the backside. And it was while we were there that they did try to cross over, and we were successful in stopping the whole thing. But just, I think there was probably a company of infantry, but we had eight of our TDs there. And it was there that all of the crews were awarded the Silver Star. The next big event was Dachau, concentration camp. Again, we were attached to an infantry unit. We had taken Nuremberg, which was north of Munich. And from there, we were assigned to take Dachau. And I left. I was in an armored car, and I left the unit because the tanks were attached, had the infantry attached to them, and there wasn't anything for me to do except just go explore and see what was going on. So I took a side road and went down to the highway between Munich and Dachau, and went into the town of Dachau, and from there we could see the entrance into Dachau, which was a well-defined, well-decorated avenue. But we went beyond that a little bit and came to a railroad track that went into Munich. And I told my driver, I said, let's get on that track and see where we can go and what we can see. So we got into the west edge of Dachau, and we came to three gondola cars with open top boxcars. And over here on the right were three ovens that were, I guess the opening was maybe 40 inches in diameter. But I wanted to see what was in the cars, so I had the driver pull up alongside, and we crawled up on the turret of the car. I looked over into the cars, and sure enough, they were full of bodies. They had been shipped in just shortly before because the bodies were in good shape, but they were being prepared to be incinerated. Anyway, we went into the camp a little ways, and there were some inmates in the camp that were, the fence was about 12 feet high, would be my guess. But here were these guys standing there on the fence with their hands in the fence, just staring at us. No activity, no, I don't know whether they didn't recognize us or what. But anyway, we had no business there. We had no defense if they were going to start shooting at us. So we turned around and went back out. But because we knew that that was going to be the objective, I stopped in Dachau. And here was a pretty big mansion right in the center of town. And I assumed it to be the Burgermeister's home. So I knocked on the door, and the lady came to the door, and I said, ma'am, my driver could speak English, could speak German. I said, lady, you have 2 hours to pack your bag and leave. We're taking over. So we made that our headquarters for a couple of nights. And then, after Dachau was released, there was no activity. The war was essentially over at that point. Well, after a couple of days, they sent us down southeast to a place called Har, H-A-R. There was no defense there, but the facilities were real nice. There was a horse stable there, and of course our guys were interested in the horses, so we got them out. And one of the sergeants was riding across this fresh sodded area, and you could hear the hoof hit something sounded like wood. So some of the guys got a shovel and turned the dirt over and opened the top of a swimming pool. They had covered it up. Well, under that cover was a Mercedes sports car in the swimming pool, which was liberated. Well, we were there a couple of days, and they got an officer from division headquarters, from Army headquarters came in, and he said, Major, we're going to want you to get your troops out of sight. We want you to put 2 tanks on the front gate, entrance to the front gate. Let no one in except a group of cars that are going to be coming in. Well, we had no idea what was going on, but we did that. We later learned that that was the surrender of the Southern German Army. One of the things, there were a lot of things that happened that tear your heart out. When we got to the Volturno River, we were up on a crest, and there's a little town up there. And we were going to set up our command post in this town. And I got out of the Jeep. I had a real keen driver, liked him a whole lot. Got out of the Jeep and went into the building that I thought might suit us. And as I stepped in the door, he stepped in behind me and took a round through the head. And that was one of the toughest things that happened to me in the war. And then I had a friend that was a lieutenant that was joined us in Massachusetts. He was a Yankee, and we just hit it off real well to begin with, and stayed friends. Well, he was a staff officer the whole wartime, and I didn't get to spend a lot of time with him. But at the end of the war, outside of Munich, we were in this little village, and he and I were standing in the middle of the road, in the middle of the street, and a German general had just surrendered to our troops just a little bit before. And Jim was talking, and by golly, if he didn't catch a round right through the middle of his head. And those are things, you won't forget, you don't want to talk about.